being told that they are stupid or not good enough or crazy.
Often forced to try drugs for the first time, are really controlled in terms of what they wear, who they see, if they're allowed to leave the house.
Being pushed against a wall.
It should be a time for finishing school, finding their feet, maybe falling in love for the first time. Instead, a staggering number of Aussie teens are struggling in violent relationships.
With teen relationships, people don't often see them as something that's quite serious. Even though people might not think the relationship will last or it's just this form of puppy love, the violence is there.
New research out today shows almost a third of 18 and 19-year-olds have experienced a form of intimate partner violence in the last year. 25% experienced emotional abuse, 12% faced physical violence, and 8% were subject to sexual abuse.
We're coming up to 20 years of the data. Within the 10,000 young people, we have two cohorts, half that we started collecting data on them when they were babies and the other half when they were around the age of 5.
The survey also found technology was a major factor, often used to abuse or control.
Controlling the use of the phone, so wanting to read messages all the time and wanting to control their social media, wanting to know where they are all the time.
So how do we bring those shocking numbers down?
What was really strong that we found was to do with parents and friends of young people playing a key role in risk minimisation. And so having supportive friendships, having relationships with your parents that are trusting and communicative.
And while schools do roll out education around respect and consent, experts say we need to do much more to help young adults enjoy safe and healthy relationships.
There's a need to put immediate investment into developing up a targeted therapeutic intervention to help these young people end these violent relationships, escape these violent relationships. We're seeing significant harm, even death occurring. We're seeing alarming rates of youth suicide. And if we don't provide an age-appropriate response, more and more children and young people are going to continue dying.
Saxon Mullins is a sexual assault survivor and a consent advocate. Saxon, there's been such a big focus on early consent education and respectful relationships. You'd think that this generation of young adults would be doing pretty well, they'd be better off. Why then do you think these measures aren't working? The stats are really surprising.
I think it's a case of we are a little bit too late in certain circumstances. You know, we've been focused on consent education and relationships and sexuality education for a very recent amount of time. You know, these young people have come up through so much of their lives with not enough of the resources that we've been talking about for the last few years. So, you know, seeing these attitudes that they have and seeing these relationship experiences that they're having is unsurprising when you look at who is raising them, who they're going to school with, who's teaching them these things. These are people who are a bit slow to the game, learning about consent education, learning about relationships and sexuality education. So while it's horrifying to see these things, it's not that surprising when we've worked on this for not that long of a time.
What else do you think is driving this violence?
The drivers of domestic and family violence are so broad, but it is down to the bare facts that we do not teach people how to engage in healthy relationships. And I think that's what we're seeing in this study. These people don't know how to respectfully engage with one another. It's hurting them, it's hurting the person they're with, it's hurting their communities and their families. And, you know, we still are seeing the bare bones education when we should be seeing robust education to help people understand what a nice relationship looks like. And that doesn't just mean beginning from, 14 years old. It means from birth we are teaching people body parts, we are teaching people small things that we're then able to build upon. So, all this discussion we've had about consent education recently is really good, but it's not enough and you can't begin it in the middle of life.
One of the really interesting things about this report is that it has a finding that healthy relationships and relationships with parents seem to decrease the risk of someone being a victim. So not the perpetrator side of it, but the victim side of it. We don't really talk about that very much, these sort of things that have to do with home life, maybe even family breakdown. What do you make of that particular finding?
I think it's really important, and I think it's something that should be widely shared, that your community and your family and your friends can help you in this particular circumstance. So it helps people not become perpetrators, and it helps people who would become victims. And I think it's really important when we're talking about this that it doesn't mean that we're blaming a victim, or we're saying, oh, if you have, you know, good friends and a good family, you wouldn't end up in a position. That's not what it means. It just means that you have healthy forms of communication. You are able to talk through things. You're seeing one red flag, you're able to talk it through with your mum or your cousin or your friend, and stop that cycle straight away. So I think it's a really important thing that we need to be ensuring that young people have really strong connections to their family and their community, and that helps us to prevent these kinds of cases.
Saxon, thanks so much for speaking with us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Of course, if this story's raised any issues for you, please contact 1800 RESPECT or reach out to Lifeline 13 11 14.